Everyone, and welcome to our final session here for ProLink Technology Live 2025. We just concluded our final coffee and bagel. We'd be randomly selecting a winner for that $50 Starbucks gift card. After this session, all of our day's winners will be announced on the conference homepage, so take a look at that. The session you have joined is our final session. It's a LIHTC compliance training with Sarah Supernaut, who is our customer success rep and trainer for ProLink Solutions. This session has an intermediate difficulty level. And before we start the session, one more time, you're going to hear me say about a couple of housekeeping notes. So again, on the right side of the screen, we'll have access to the chat feature. And right below the chat feature, you'll have the polls. So pay attention to any of our polls that we have that pop up throughout the session, as well as have any questions, comments, concerns throughout the session, you'll be able to use the chat feature. Now, I'd like to pass things off to Sarah. So Sarah, if you could please take it away.
I shall. I'm going to replace your share. Hello again, everybody. Now I am sharing my screen, and this is our session agenda for today. We're going to talk about our LIHTC program setup, what you need to set up specifically for LIHTC, the compliance reviews, what you see when you're doing a compliance review, and some of the pieces, parts we need to do to finalize that. And then we're going to have Q&A. And I want to preface this by saying this is the second year that we have done the LIHTC program. And next year, we're already in discussions about doing home and additional set-asides and the brand new HCF program. So something to look forward to in 2026. If you're a compliance geek, we have you covered. So let's talk about setting up the LIHTC program. I know that we do have some attendees who have been using the system for quite a while. I do also expect we have some of our newer implementations coming to attend these sessions. So we're going to just kind of hit the basics as a refresher. But before we get started, as always, we're going to have some poll questions sprinkled in here. And I don't think I threw in a pop quiz question, but I'm not going to swear my life on it. So our first poll question, you'll have 30 seconds to answer. How many asset managers at your agency would you consider proficient with ProLink HFA compliance evaluations and reviews for LIHTC? Those are your options. And so we'll wait about 20 more seconds before we ask Sam to show us the results of that. Right, Sam, I think we should be good.
Yep, go ahead and move to the next slide.
Okay.
Is it now populating for you?
Hang on, let me try something.
Okay,
Oh,
there
there
it
we
is.
go. 73%. That's 1 to 5. That's pretty good. And all of them, I love your confidence. Yay. We do have a lot of people using ProLink HFA who know everything inside and out. And as always, can be a benefit to me when I get confused and need some clarification from a real world perspective. So thank you for answering. Let's see. What do we have to do? Okay, now I was looking at my timer because I'm trying to time myself because you all know that I talk way too fast. And I want to make sure that I cover everything and don't leave us a lot of free time. So the first thing we're talking about is your most recent MTSP income and rent limits have been imported on the income and rent limits data import. Most of you do this, you're in tune when HUD publishes those. You get the email saying, hey, come out and upload these. We do upload them for other programs, but today we are going to try to focus on LIHTC. So this is, you import those every year with the effective date. The effective date is super important, and that should be provided by HUD as well. Then if you have utility allowances and you're going to test against the utility allowances, you want to make sure that you have your utility allowances set up. We do have something on our roadmap to create a smart docs that are going to update utility allowances yearly. The way that it works right now, you have to pull them all in to make changes, but we're going to try to have a template out there for everybody to be able to just upload those and append what's already out there going forward. So if you don't use utility allowances now, check back with us in 2026 and we'll see about helping you facilitate using the smart docs that we're excited to have for that. So obviously, if we're talking LIHTC, we're talking bins. So you need to make sure that you have all your bins set up with the correct set-aside data and any multi-project building information that you would have. And the buildings are created and associated to the bin with the placed in date, service date populated. And I'll just bring up, I'm probably going to show this twice because I'm really excited about it. But when you're on your selected property and you have your bins, some of you may use the portfolio property data update utility to populate your bins from the TCA deal. Some of you may do it manually. But if you pulled them over, the one thing it will not do is if your bin or your project is part of a multi-building project, it doesn't mark that on the portfolio property data update because that information, I believe, comes straight from the 8609 and that's not part of our update. But a very cool thing we did is now when you go to your bin screen, we're just going to pretend those all said no. Okay. So imagine, if you will, with me, you can click on show editable grid and you can update these. Instead of going to each building separately, you can just update these here. And then if you make edits to the bins, you can also do that there. And then you can click back to where it's not editable anymore. So if you need to add that 8B checkbox, let's just do a quick refresher so we know what we're talking about. We mostly are concerned about this check mark because that activates this bin to be available for a multi-building project. So that was a neat little enhancement that we added that I really liked. Your units are going to have to be active and associated with the correct building with a place and service date. We do have a new building units template. It is one per building. It allows you to make some edits as far as like building amenities that you want to add. If your agency happens to have UDS that you want to add to your units, you can take this building template and add those. It was just easier from a processing standpoint to be able to do it building by building by building. So that's another little extra something we have this year. And then obviously you have to have your compliance reviews created for the year in order to add the tenant events to them. And then make sure that your owner agents have been added to a work center and have tenant portal access to be able to go in and submit their tenant events, whether it's manually or via XML. And this is a reminder that we probably sent on an email that we're doing our tenant portal training for continuing education credits on November 5th. So if you haven't registered, I suspect I might be sending out a reminder to everybody soon. So that's your advance warning. So once everybody can get in here and your owner agents can update it, that's how obviously we get the tenant events in. So this is just kind of our basic data setup to make sure that you're ready to go to take in your LIHTC tenant events. Now, when you're on the edit compliance program, basically this gets set up when you first onboard, when you know what your compliance start and end dates are going to be. You would go in and create the compliance program for LIHTC. If you want to allow pre-program review, you can do that. What that does is just basically if the official start date of the program isn't until like 1/1/2024 in this example, but your owner agent has started leasing up. I mean, maybe you're not actually going to start recognizing credits or whatever, but you can still take in tenant events before that compliance start date if you have the projected place and service date updated on the buildings. And those tenant event dates can be before the actual compliance start date. The other thing you have to make sure of, do your recertification requirement. I always say if you can get it to where you can do within the compliance period, that's great. That way it doesn't have to do anniversary math or before and after math. Some of these recertification requirements, you may not even need one for your LIHTC program for whatever reason, but you can set that there. With the new implementation of the HTF program, we did add a new value, and that's anniversary month, first day. So if you have like a tenant that moved in 5/12, 2024, you can date that recert on May 1st, 2025, and it will make sure that it's just looking at the month they moved in and the first day of the anniversary month. We have the elderly designation that you can use for some of your senior properties if you need to. Right now, it's just 100%. And what that's going to do is going to go through all your events and make sure that at least one household member is at least 55. Again, that elderly designation bugs me because I am a year away from that, and I object. I always object when I bring this up. I'm not going to stop. Resyndication and resyndication start date. When the checkbox is selected, this is for if you have additional credits and you're going to be using new credits for, a certain period of time, you can select that resyndication checkbox and the start date of when that's going to be. And then you need to make sure that the resyndication place and service date field is populated on any buildings that you're going to be evaluating for the LIHTC program for that resyndication start date. So our multi-building project setup, in order to transfer tenant events between buildings for LIHTC, you need to have a multi-building project. And I see and you have to have the 8B box selected. I got excited and went ahead and showed this to you because apparently I'm a geek and I like it that much. But that's what you go to your bins, editable grid, change those if you need to, and then create your multi-building project. Now, if this is average income minimum set aside for the project, you're going to see your designations down here. These are not, real world designations, but that's where they're going to show up. And you can also have more than one multi-building project per property, but a bin can only be in one multi-building project at a time. Now, if you need to change the set aside on a bin and it's part of a multi-building project, you have to take that bin out of the multi-building project, save it, and update the set aside before you add it back to a project. Because once you've added these bins to the multi-building project, they're kind of locked in. So that's just kind of an FYI if that's something you ever need to do for any reason. All right, so let's talk about everybody's favorite, the compliance reviews and all the exceptions that go with them. So there are a bunch of tabs on our compliance reviews, and I updated this right before we implemented HTF. But when I go through here, you might see some HTF things. Just know that's out there now, but we're not going to be talking about it yet. On your main tab of your compliance review, you're going to have all these, or on your compliance review screen, you're going to have your main tab, which has a lot of the basic information that you can see here. And then you'll have your LIHTC and LIHTC income limits tab, which is what we really care about right now. When you see the tenant events in the log, that is based on having a config setting to QA mode. We don't recommend that for production, just for processing and loading screen purposes, especially when you have lots of events. But that is something, if you're testing something in UAT or you're training in UAT, you can use that log if you need to. The compliance period start and end dates must be within the compliance program start and end dates on your compliance review. So if your compliance period start, unless you have that pre-program review box checked, in that case, it can be before that. But these dates, once you've saved it and run it and finalized this one has been finalized, those start dates are locked. But usually most of the time, I think our compliance periods, once the project is onboarded and going and it's an asset management phase, it's going to be the 1st of January to December 31st. Sometimes you might have some buildings that are placed in service like June 1st through the end of the year. Then your compliance period might start then. Totally up to you. But all the tenant events will have to be dated after that compliance period start date. It has to be in between those dates. The compliance program status is calculated based on programs passing and failing in the LIHTC tab. We're going to talk about that grid on the LIHTC tab 2 today. And then your overall results and compliance overall status reason, you select those manually because you can change the values for those. If you have certain verbiage you use for your results and for your compliance when you're reporting to your property managers or whoever you need to report to, you can update those pick lists in admin if you need to. But the compliance overall status reason, that one cannot be edited. That one is a system value. So the tenant event submission status, this is impending until owner agents submit their tenant events in the tenant portal. And once they've submitted that, they can't make any updates until you set it back to pending. At this point, I think a lot of our agencies do have a workflow set up, letting them know when, especially during compliance season, which once again is upon us, not too far away now. When your owner agent submits their tenant events in the tenant portal, the asset manager gets a notification saying, hey, so-and-so has submitted their tenant events. And that way, you know, oh, I can go look at these and evaluate these now. Because most of you aren't busy enough, and who doesn't want to just jump on that and get it over with? But if you don't have a workflow for that, for knowing when your owner agents submit those tenant events, reach out to us and we can show you how to set it up. It's super quick and easy, but that way you know. And then if you go through and you evaluate like right off the bat and you see that they have a ton of exceptions and things they absolutely need to take care of, you can immediately address it, set this back to pending, let them know, hey, put a post on the work center, here's some changes you need to make, or however you communicate that exception discussion and verifying their data is good during the compliance season. However, I don't know if that's email, work center, phone call. I know every agency is different and every property is different. Now the value of the original 8823 cent to owner, that's going to be populated if you have a compliance audit record and the fiscal year the fiscal year of the audit matches the compliance review year. So if you're have added 8823s at any point, these are going to show up on your compliance review as far as reporting and kind of cross informationally there. So something we have added in 2025, which you're going to see, is if your property has over 100 units, you will receive an email notification when your evaluation is complete. So when you first do it, and this is for a lot of places that have a certain number of units on their property, I believe this is a configuration. So reach out if you want to talk about how you want to set that up. But once you hit evaluate, you're going to get this message and everything's going to disable. And then you're going to see evaluation in process. You will get an email when it's done evaluating. I don't wait for the email when I'm testing. I just keep clicking on that compliance review until it's done. And I'll show you how impatient I am here in a second. Let me stop here and go over into our compliance reviews one more time. Let's see. We will do this one. I want to make sure that we have enough to generate this. So let me make sure I have the right compliance review here. That might have enough on it. I'm not sure what my threshold in production is set to, but when you go in here and you want to run it, and you create evaluate, it's going to give you that warning saying anything that's overridden. And then this, we may not have enough units here, so I'll find another one. Oh, we might. There we go. Due to the size of your property, your evaluation. So it did have enough units. So when I go back over here to the compliance reviews page, it's going to tell me, oh, that went really quick. It went a lot quicker than I thought it would. So I pop back in here and that's done. Sometimes it'll say evaluation in process. So I just click compliance reviews, compliance reviews, compliance reviews until it's done. This kind of staggers who's doing the reviews and it kind of puts them in line. So all these evaluations are competing with each other because I know that we were having problems with some people getting everything hung up because everybody's out there evaluating their stuff. That's why we added this functionality. So when you see this, that's new, that's what it is, and it should be a good thing. Now, the first time you evaluate your compliance review, any missing requirements will show up on our main tab if there are any. If they will, they're going to show up down here in this box. Most of them should be caught by tenant portal validation. Like missing requirements should be resolved prior to the HUD export. We know that, but when the owner agents are validating before they submit, all this stuff should be taken care of. So a lot of these that are on their end, their responsibility to make sure those all that data is there, they'll have to take care of that before they submit them to you. But some of these other ones, like if you've forgotten to put a county or you haven't imported your income limits or something of that nature, that will show up as an internal missing requirement because that's something you folks have to take care of. And missing requirements is something that you will see, and I'm sure many of you have seen when you do your HUD export and you look at your error log to tell you what's missing. All of that is the expectation that the missing requirements are going to be taken care of and all compliance reviews finalized before you report the next year. So now let's talk about this example and our applicable fraction calculations. When you go out to your property and you have evaluated it on your LIHTC tab, this is where you're going to find this. Now, if you have a multi-building project, it's going to state that's a multi-building project because it will say project. But if there is no project, it will be blank. In this example at top, I only have one bin, so there's no reason for me to make that a multi-building project. So the pass failed is going to be based on the percentage of low income units. If the lesser of the square foot fraction or the unit fraction is greater than or equal to the applicable fraction entered in the bin record, it'll be passed. If not, then it's going to be failed. And again, this is based on one building. And even though we have all these other buildings right here that they've passed, if it's part of a multi-building project, it just takes one bad bin to mess everything up. It's kind of like the whole one bad apple thing, right? The applicable fraction gets defined on the bin. And I don't think everybody does 100% LIHTC every time on their bins, but usually for multi-building projects, I try to just because it's a good example to show you. The unit fraction is going to be the percentage of active low-income units without compliance exceptions, and that's important to note. You may have all these units out there that are low-income units, and you're like, but those values should be higher. If they have exceptions, it takes them out of the calculation. It's going to take them out of, I believe, we're talking fractions, numerator, which my niece was out here a couple months ago. I helped her with like 5th grade fractions. So I think it's numerator, denominator. I had a refresher. So that's going to determine whether or not your applicable fraction is met or not, and if the program status is going to fail. So pass failed is going to be based on the set aside over here in this scenario. The set aside, different from the applicable fraction, is going to be defined on the bin of the multi-building project. And that means 40%, 40 out of 60. When we talk 40-60, 40% of the low-income units must be at or below 60% AMI for the county on that particular building. And you may have, in a multi-building project, you might have buildings have different counties. I don't know how that filters into a real world scenario, but it might. And then, of course, your minimum set aside is going to be set on the bin. I think right now we have 40-60, we have 20-50. There might be a couple of agencies that had customized values put in, I'm not sure. And then we now have average income test. The goal set aside will take priority over the defined minimum set aside on the bin or multi-building project if calculated. So if for some reason you have your bin set at 80% and then you set your goal set aside at 100%, it's going to test that as 100%. It's going to override it. So if you have any real world scenarios of why you would have a goal set aside at 100%, but not your applicable fraction, let me know because I'm curious as to what situations you might want to do that. Just to help with our best practices and give examples of why agencies would want to do that if you do. And then we have our calculated set aside, which is the percentage of active low income units without compliance exceptions that meet that set aside. And in this example, we have failed as well. So our grid, when we talk about the federal applicable fraction set aside status grid, you want everything to pass. You want all the exceptions to be accounted for. And so some of you do know that when you go through and you're updating your compliance exceptions and you're verifying with everybody, you might override some of these exceptions, or you may send it back to them to make changes. And then you have to reevaluate it. So as you're going back and forth, getting the compliance events, like meeting the requirements they need to meet, you might want to start calculating this again, because that's every time you make a change and rerun an evaluation, or if you've overridden some exceptions, when you hit that calculate AFSA button, it's going to generate new values. So this is the example where in Esca Place, we had overridden some exceptions. And then if you override all the exceptions and you hit that calculate AFSA button, then everything passes. But before we get into this one, I'm going to come back here and I want to look at this in practice. So let's look at a couple of like real world scenarios that might happen. Did I overwrite all of them? I did, so I don't want that one. Let's do this one. Bear with me while I go into this one. This one has a whole lot. Let's see what's going on with this one. I haven't changed anything since we've been in here. So we have one that failed, two that failed. We have two of these that failed. It's not part of a multi-building project, right? So let's go look at some of these. Household income above eligible limit, gross rent, eligible limit, low income units used on a transient basis. That's probably going to mean that somebody moved in, moved out within a 6-month period. And then we have the transfer between bins and a single building election is not allowed. We're going to take care of that one first. So just remember up here, we have this one is failed at 75% and this one failed at 87%. So the first thing I'm going to do is just, maybe I just forgot to create a multi-building project on here. I was like, oh yeah, this is a multi-building project. I'm going to pop over here and I'm going to create my multi-building project. And I'm not going to be fancy with it. I'm just going to be like, this is MVP. Everything's going to be 40/60. I'm going to add all, and I'm going to save and return, and that's done. So now I want to go back over to my compliance review, and I believe we were in 2024. It's going to give me that yellow warning saying, hey, you've changed some data that is pertinent to the compliance review, or it's not. I totally expected that to update. It didn't. So that was a really, really bad teaser for something that just didn't happen. But you would, if you changed it, you would go back and reevaluate. And this should get rid of that transfer. So now that's gone back to past. And that transfer is no longer there because we made this a multi-building project. So now we just have one bin that's just a pain in our behinds. I'm going to go ahead and override all of these because if I override these and I save this, oh, I'm going to have to put comments. You have to put comments in here. And I know everybody else's comments are pertinent and articulate and provide good information for why these are being overridden. Now, after I override these, it's not going to automatically update this, right? But now that I've overridden these, here's one that I had overridden saying tenant was in hospital, research was not completed. I can hit the calculate AFSA button. It's going to think about it. And I guess I need to override this one too because the applicable fraction should have been met here. Unless I have and this is where you start thinking, I think all my data is right. What's going on? Maybe all of my units aren't populated and that's what's happening because that's what I'm doing right here in real time. So I'm going to go take a look at my units and see if maybe I have some units on here that are vacant because that would do it as well. Well, why did that happen? That was definitely a me thing. All right, so over here to the units. And let's see what we have going on. Ah, no, that's 2025. I do have an employee unit, and that might be the one that is dropping that out. So what I'm gonna do, just for the fun of it, is I'm gonna go in here and change this employee unit to a low income unit. I'm just gonna pretend that I know why I was testing this. I was testing this to see if you had to add a birth date on an employee unit. So we're going to make this a low income unit. I'm going to save it. It's going to holler at me to select a program, so I'm going to. This is where you see I've added HTF program, but just wave at it as we go by, because we're not talking about HTF yet, but I'm excited to know that it's there. And then I need to add my tenant rent at the very least. Then I'm going to add some household members really quick. I'm kind of taking a look at our time to see how we're doing. We're doing great. I will add one household member. Apparently I need to watch Superman this weekend. I've been told repeatedly to watch it, so maybe I will. I don't know when he was born. Superman's old. And then no. So I think this is everything I need. I do want to bring up something that you might see now. We have special status on tenant events that we just added as well. As we go through here, I'm just going to kind of show you a few things. We have disabled also at the household member level. And now I'm going to have to add an income. Even if it's 0, we have to add that income record. And most of you know that. I know some agencies have the option to actually type that in on the main tab at the tenant event instead of entering it here. So let's just, yeah, Superman doesn't make a lot of money. Well, Clark Kent doesn't because, he's a reporter. All right. So now I've changed that, and I'm going to go back into my compliance review. In the real world, the owner agent would do this. So just remember, when I was making this change, I was pretending to be an owner agent. You all should not have to do any of that updating back here at all. But now it's telling me I've evaluated that. So let's see if that employee unit was what was causing it to be a problem. Oh, it was a me thing. Your owner agent would have put that information in, I believe. Most restricted income designation, most restrictive. And these are some of the changes that we're going to talk about, I think, during the tenant portal training in November. And then we'll have our additional tenant portal training in January. Okay, so I think it's going to be happy now. Let's evaluate. And this is where I struggle with, like, where did I start? What was I doing? Now I have to come back. I have a feeling that our asset managers are way, way better at remembering where they started than I am. So it still failed. We're still at 91.67. So we'll just overwrite all exceptions. And it may be that applicable fraction hasn't been met. And let me hit this one more time, because otherwise it's that market unit that's throwing it out. And in a real world situation, if you have a market unit, then that's going to be a problem. It is the market unit. So in this scenario, in order to get this, well, it looks like, all right, well, it did pass. I guess we're going to be okay with that then. And then obviously once you're done, before you finalize and do all that stuff, you want to make sure this is set to submitted. But that was just a really quick, a little painful, going through talking about making updates and overrides and how that's going to affect the applicable fraction. Yeah, the applicable fraction wasn't met because of that market unit. I'm going to have to go back and verify that, but I won't do that right now. I might if we have some time. All right, so AIT, now we're talking about calculated AIT imputed income. This is a little different than your 40/60 and your 20/50s, because we have put the specific calculation in here in the training material of what that's going to be and how we get to that calculation. Now, this is only going to populate whenever you do have an average income. The bin is selected at average income. So if you normally don't see that, then that's fine. It's not a problem. You just want to see a value when you have your AIT imputed income. You can also do the same thing as far as overriding these for whatever reason. As you know, with the AIT, you can see some of the average income values on here. MTSP 50%, et cetera, et cetera. So once let's go back. I overrode these and saved it and calculated AFSA, and then it went to 60 like it should be, and now it had passed. So AIT is a little bit different as far as what you're going to see on the screen, but this is what the calculation looks like when you're wondering why it's not meeting it or doing what it's supposed to do. Data has been modified. If you make any changes to the data that affects the compliance review, if somebody else has changed something, if you change a county on your building or a date or something of that nature, you're going to see this. And that just means you have to evaluate it before you finalize it. Sometimes when you see our screens when we're demoing things or training on things, you're going to see this is dirty. We see that, you shouldn't see that. That just means that it has to be evaluated. Something's different. So if you don't see as dirty, it's really okay. It's just a dirty record. It's nothing terrible. So then we have the AIT tab. If you have your LIHTC program has a bin that is average income test, you're going to see the current designations for each unit on each building that has a bin that is average income. So that's where you can verify that without having to exit and go to a data view. Now we can talk about the LIHTC income limits tab. This shows the bins on the property grouped together by project if you have a multi-building project. If you don't have a multi-building project, they'll be listed out separately. It does default to the 45-day rule. And I think most of us know 45-day rule means that if you're, let's say you have uploaded your income and rent limits for 2025 and the effective date is April 1st, 2025. If you select this box, it's going to use the 2024 limits for your tenant events with dates up to, I want to say, May 15th. So 45 days after the effective date of the 2025 limits, it will still be going back and using 2024 limits. So that's something, again, it defaults to checked when you create the compliance review. You can uncheck it if you want your tenant events to use the limits on the exact effective date that they were supposed to be used. And this is what it looks like when you have all your bins that are not part of a multi-building project and they're broken up. And if you had, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a scattered site and maybe there were different rules for that, each bin was in a different location or something, then you could, check these, uncheck these for whichever one you want to use. Just know that's where the system knows which limits to use based on that 45-day rule. So now for the fun part, all our compliance reviews. Applicable fraction has not been met. Project failed to meet the federal set-aside requirement. These are the ones we're used to seeing the most. And these are also the ones that go away usually once we have either resolved exceptions or overridden exceptions. So we had that one market unit that I am changing to a low income unit because it's going to drive me crazy if I don't. That was for 2025. Let's see why this would be. So in order to manipulate the data, I'm going to go ahead and delete this market move-in because this unit is showing as vacant at the end of 2024 and we don't do that. So I'm going to delete this move out too. Again, you shouldn't be doing this. The owner agent should be doing this stuff. Don't do as I do. Do as I say. And see, it's not going to let me. So let me go back over here. I have to change this back to, hang on. Stay with me as I struggle. That's me. I'm doing horrible things and I shouldn't be hitting the back button, but I do it anyway. Apologies for that. But for some of you newer to the system that we've trained recently, and I keep telling you that their user error does happen, even if you've been in the system for years and years and years, that is a prime example of doing things you shouldn't do. And I just did them. So everybody's going to stumble over their own feet every now and then. It's perfectly normal. It just makes us human and it's okay. So I'm going to change this back to pending so I can delete that event. And as soon as this saves, I can absolutely do it. Go, save. You can do it. You can do it. Aha. All right, so now I can delete it. As you notice, I often have a lot of browser sessions open because I like to go back and forth a lot. All right, so now we've gotten rid of the move out, the LIHTC move out, and the market move in. This unit, for all intents and purposes, was occupied at the end of 2024. So when I go back over to my compliance review, where it says, going to evaluate this again. I don't like to just tell you what's happening. I want to show you. And look what I did. I have missing requirements. Okay. Again, I have forgotten to put the most restrictive income designation and rent designation in here. So go me. Now that is done. Now it's going to tell me to reevaluate. We have that missing requirement taken care of. We might get the message that it's going to email me when that is done. Oh, nope. That was short enough it didn't have to. Huh. I think this is not an issue for anybody but me because I'm trying to figure out, and usually when I'm like trying to figure out what I did wrong. But overall we passed, so I guess that's okay. I'll go back and look at that later. Anyway, those generally tend to go away when we go through and we start resolving these exceptions and changing, having the owner agent change data in the system or have some of those exceptions overridden. Gross rent exceptions. These have come a long way since about 2 or 3 years ago when we used to just have like it would just tell you that the household income was above the eligible limit. And in these situations, like 518, whatever, there's a chance, especially when you know your max income limit is like a small amount, that your owner agent has just typed in the wrong amount, but you still have to do your due diligence and verify that's incorrect. Same thing over here. Maybe like for the gross rent, maybe they meant to type in $216.80. Regardless, it could be an issue that they put in their property management system before they generated that XML, or it could be when they typed it in the tenant portal manually, they kind of messed that up. So these are easy things to reach out and verify and have those resolved by your owner agent. We saw the transfer in between bins in a single building election. And we know that, if you want to transfer between bins, you have to have those in a multi-building project. And the low-income units used on a transient basis. If I move in, I have a tenant that moves in on January 1st and they move out on March 30th, if it's like a 1-bedroom or higher, that's, they haven't been in the unit for 6 months or more. And so they want to flag that, just, hey, verify that this isn't a transient unit. With your standing room only, your SROs, I think is what those are, single room only. It's 30 days. You'll get the transient error for 30 days on those units. Unit does not have a recertification event. That just means they haven't had a recertification event, whether or not the owner agent didn't do it or provide it or update their system. But if you have your recertification requirement set up to require it, then at least within the compliance period, it's going to tell you that you need one. The most times we see these, if you want them specifically on the anniversary date, a lot of times people just, as long as they get one at some point during the year, regardless of the move-in date, most people don't care, but it is going to be very dependent on what value you have selected for that recertification. The low-income unit is occupied by non-qualified full-time students. You have to have a valid value if you have like a full-time student. And now, on all your LIHTC household members have to have yes or no. You can't leave it blank, because if you leave it blank, that's one of those validation errors that the owner agents will get when they've submitted their tenant event. So they have to, if it's a LIHTC household member, it has to be yes or no. And then if it is yes, you're going to have valid values selected on that tenant event. So that way it'll pass. So that exception is basically like, okay, you have a low-income unit occupied by a non-qualified full-time student. What is their exception? Go select this on the LIHTC program. If the owner agent has entered that manually, they can do that. Otherwise, they have to update it in their system and regenerate the XML. LIHTC compliance exceptions, violation of the vacant unit rule. These are always fun to track down. It displays if there's vacant units on event or MBP. MBP is multi-building project, and a market movement occurs that is comparable size or smaller. It will violate, or it will display for all vacant units for each market movement event. And this is a little bit different than the available unit rule. And sometimes you have to go look at your list of tenant events to kind of see the order. And I need to look over here real quick and see. You all have exception history, but unless you have your QA mode turned on, then I don't think that you're able to see this tenant events tab. This is also, if you can't see the tenant events tab, you can create a date of use specifically for a certain period of units. And that way you can sort everything by the event date and try to look and find out, like, okay, what was vacant at this time of this move in and why didn't move into this one. I haven't come up with a really good kind of spreadsheet tool to help with that, just as far as a mental process of stepping through it. I have a feeling some of our asset managers already have this handled. They know exactly how to track it down. But it does require a little digging to find out, let's see what's going on here. And when you get this exception, I mean, again, it probably depends on the property and your relationship with them to find out. It's like, did you really try to rent this to a low income person before the market tenant moved in? And I'm going to guess most of the time it's yes. I'm sure some properties are more on top of that than others, but you can override this very easily by just verifying with them they did try to market it and get a low income tenant in there before renting to a market unit. In this scenario, we changed the 1/20/24 move-in tenant event to low income and selected it. Maybe they accidentally put in as a market, but that's how I got through it. Again, if it's a legitimate, they couldn't get a low income tenant in, you can definitely override that exception. Just make really good notes. Same thing with the violation of the available unit rule. But these kind of display if there's an over income event before that and the market move in of comparable size or smaller occur after. So this is in case you have like a recertification where all of a sudden they're making $500,000 a year. It's only a violation if it's below the Ben applicable fraction. Otherwise, it won't be. Again, it gets tested within a building or a Ben, and you can reach out to the owner agent to find out if what's going on with that particular tenant. Why are they 140% over the income, et cetera, et cetera. So then we get to the compliance file tracking tab with your owner certs and other required files being added here. Most of the time, that's one of the exceptions we get. So this is a way to either verify any documentation they provided has been received. And then I believe you can go in here and you can also, if you want to pull any files from Procorum that may have added to the work center for this, you can pull those over from Procorum Like here, I'm on the edit owner certification record. I didn't put a lot of data in here. I admit it. And you can get files from Bookworm to add them just so they are attached to that compliance review if that's something you want to do. And then lacking an owner certification record will result in an exception. So that's just a reminder to do it and make sure that you have that data out there. So when you finalize your compliance reviews, if you need to issue 8823s, if that's required for you to before you can finalize your compliance review because you have exceptions, it's a problem property. You want to get an 8823 out there. And I know everybody doesn't want to do 8823s, but sometimes you gotta. You can generate that from the tax form tab on edit buildings, or if that's something that happens as part of your compliance audit, you can create them directly from the building 8823's tab, 8823 tab on the compliance audit itself. And if you want some more information about 8823s, we do have a training out there. It was a webinar we did last August, and it is available on YouTube if you would like to look at that. So to finalize your compliance reviews, if it has not met all the requirements to be finalized, the finalize button will be disabled. But when you hover over that finalize button, it's going to give you all the reasons why. Sometimes, usually it's like the tenant event submission status is equal to pending, or you have reviews that haven't been finalized prior, or you haven't, you don't have a prev to do it, and there are still missing requirements. So there will be reasons why you cannot finalize a compliance review. But something new that we did add, and this comes from sometimes even after you finalized a review, you have to go back because the owner agent may have left out a move out or forgot to update some data in a year or a prior year. Because that does happen a lot, we added this admin finalize override button. That is an actual priv that gets given to specific people. So let's say I've got 2024 finalized and we start with our 2025 events, and the owner is like, oh, I forgot this move out happened last year. I need to add that. What you could do is you could unfinalize that compliance review, set the tenant events back to pending, allow them to add that move out, and then finalize again without having to go through the evaluation process again. So that's what that's going to do. And I know that's going to make a lot of people's lives easier. So we don't have to do that manually in the database for you. Now this priv gives you the ability to do it yourself. Once you finalize it, it's going to bring up this little modal, and you need to put in information in here to make sure that you're very specific with keeping track of that information. So you know why that was finalized without going through the evaluation process again. So once all your requirements are met, you click finalize. Oh, I got excited. And then you're done. That's it. Once you're finalized, you're done. Until next year, if they say they forgot to move out, you've got to unfinalize an admin override. But that is kind of the fun process of getting through your compliance review. So now we have another poll question. This may have been the same from last year, but we're curious. How many LIHTC average income properties does your agency currently maintain? A, less than 5, B, 5 or 10, C, 10 or more. And we'll give you just a few seconds. I don't know if anybody knows off their top of the head. I know you can't go out and count like how many average income properties you have in 30 seconds or less. You might be able to. That would be cool. But yeah, just kind of best guess and how many of these that you have in your portfolio. Sam, I think we're at 30 seconds. Are we close?
Yep. Yeah, you can advance to the next slide. It may be a delay.
That's okay. All right. I'll do it again. There we go. Less than 5. 10 or more. Okay, so we do have some that have quite a few. Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I'm wondering how all that's going and how the designation updates are going for your owner agents. We do cover The AIT designation updates heavily in our tenant portal training that's coming up. So yeah, I haven't attended MBRs in a long time, so I'm curious to see how the AIT function is working. I'm sure it's working well, or Jessica would have heard about it by now. So I think, yeah, that's all we have. We got 5 minutes left, a little bit early. Do we have any questions that need to be answered or that we want to talk about?
There are no outstanding questions at this time.
Okay, then I'm done and you all can do the wrap up. I will stop sharing and I will go quiet. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for everyone for attending our final session for ProLink Technology Live 2025. We hope you found great value in everything that was covered in our sessions today and yesterday. As a final reminder, a copy of all the PowerPoints will be available in the resource area on the side of the session detail screen. The recordings of all the sessions are available also on demand on the conference platform for 90 days after the event. Now, if you head back to the conference platform, you'll be able to see the 3 people who won our coffee and bagel discussions for today. So congratulations to them. We also have a survey available on the homepage. This is a chance for us to offer feedback regarding the conference. So we highly encourage you to participate so we can continue making ProLink Tech Live even more resourceful for you. And this concludes ProLink Tech Live. We hope you had a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your year. And if we don't see you at the CE training next month, thank you again for joining ProLink Technology Live, and we hope to see you again next year and throughout our webinar series. Thank you again.